Now this area is the part where you'll be using a lot. There are the tools that Photoshop provides for you to create your amazing works of art. We're going to do a quick overview. Once again, I'm not getting into the small details just so that you're not going to get confused. But every tool here is combined with the settings above it, and each tool has its own settings. And then you can use the colors and the properties down here to make certain changes to the layers. So it starts from here. You choose a tool, you make the adjustments, you change the color or the properties, and then it will be applied to your layer. So I'm going to first unlock my background layer by clicking on the lock, and now it's no longer background but layer 0. Once again, we can go ahead and name it something, let's name it white. And let's get started with our move tool. Now the move tool, as the name says, it's for moving layers. Right now we have this background color, and I can move this white layer across my canvas. And I can only move things that are not locked. So if you remember from previous lessons, if I lock a layer, I can no longer move it. But I can only do it once it's unlocked. So you would use the move tool to move shapes, text, even adjustments around your canvas. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to use a shape tool to draw maybe like 2 circles. I'll give them a fill so they're easier to distinguish and grab. Okay. So I have 2 shapes right here, and using my move tool, I can move these shapes around and adjust them how I like them. Let me put it next to here, put it there, but once again, if I lock one of these layers, I can no longer move it. I'm moving the other parts, which is the background, this other ball, and that's how this tool works. And then when you right click, some of the tools have more options. They have like different versions. So if you notice, next to each icon, there's this little triangle, and all of the tools have it except for the zoom tool and the frame tool. So if you right click on this tool, we have another option for artboard tool. Again, this is for artboard. We haven't really gotten into it. So we're going to skip over this, but this is how you can move artboards around. And it's just related to artboards. Moving on to our next tool, we have this rectangle with dashed lines. Now this is called the rectangle tool. If you go here, in it, this is where you can make selections of rectangles. So if I'm only selecting a rectangle within the circle, let me unlock this layer. I'm making a selection inside that circle. And if I were to, let's say, make a new layer, I want to only paint the inside of this rectangle, I can do so. And now my circle has a rectangle in the middle of it. So that's what the rectangle tool is. If you right click, we have other types. We have one for circle. So I'm going to grab a circle. First, I'm going to hit Control D to deselect that area. Then draw a circle here. And once again, whatever I do, it will be limited to the inside, but because our layer 1 was below ellipse 2, we couldn't really see the changes. So I'm going to bring it up, and now we can see the circle. Again, Control D to deselect. You would deselect once you're done with that selection. So let me just Control Z and delete all of the stuff I've made. Deselect that. And then we have single row. And this means that if I create this line here, the selection is very small, but it's a horizontal line. So if I go with my brush, let me create a new layer and maybe paint in only this part. Once I deselect, there's only a line in that area. Similarly, we have the single column one. This was the row. And if I draw one, let's do one here. Again, use my black brush to draw something. And now we have 2 lines. that I have painted using these two selection tools. So let me delete layer 1. And that's just how selections are made with this tool. Now, apart from painting in and coloring those areas, you would use these things to maybe write in a text, use it for mask tools, and many other things. We'll get into them in the other lessons in a more practical way. And similar to this, we have a more controllable selection tool, which is the lasso tool right here. Now the lasso tool, like it says, let me create my layer, allows me to just freely draw a random shape, and once I finish and close it off, I have that selection. Once again, I could use it to paint in, crop that, maybe let's undo this. I can go on my ellipse layer, or actually I'm going to undo that. I'm going to show you how you can create a new layer based off your selection. So I'm going to use red to just like draw something here, and then using my lasso tool on this layer, let's say I'll try to draw a heart, and now I have a heart selection. And if I have my selection and I'm on this layer and I hold Control and press J once, turn off layer 1, I now made a selection, the heart selection, from my layer, which is separate. Let's turn layer 2 off from the first layer, because we made a copy, a selective copy of our first layer. So you could do the same thing with the previous tool, the rectangle and the circle one, even the single row and column ones. But you can have more control with the lasso tool, but it would be a little bit messy because it's not a precise shape. And then we also have that little triangle option, so that means we have more options. So let's hit right click. And then we have two other options, the polygonal lasso tool and the magnetic lasso tool. These are similar, but instead of just being a free-form random shape, it has sharp corners. So let's try to do a triangle maybe. Make our first point, and you see it follows you, but it won't create a point unless you click on the screen first. So I clicked here, and then we have another one, click here, and I'm going to close it off. Notice next to our mouse there's nothing, and then when you come on the first line there is a circle that's indicating that you're closing off your selection. And that's what we want because we wanted a triangle. Click it once and now I have a triangular selection. Again, I can make a selective copy, hit Ctrl J, turn the first layer off so we can see, and now I have a triangle cut out from my first layer. Let me delete that triangle. And then I'm going to right click. We have the magnetic lasso tool. What this means is that if I try to trace the sides of this shape right here, I can start by clicking once, and as you can see, it's creating its own point. Photoshop is finding those areas. It does mess up sometimes, you just gotta help it through. It's going to find those areas and it's going to create those points for you. This is a really cool tool because you didn't have to spend that much time. Photoshop uses its own judgment to find those points. And then again, we have that circle thing, hit it once. Now we have a selection. Though we can't really hit Ctrl J, I'm going to move my selection. And actually, sorry, this moves the selection. As you could see, maybe I want it to be here on top of everything else. Hit Ctrl D, it's now on top of everything else. Although we could have done that by just moving it around. But let me try to do something like this. See, when it's a shape that doesn't have any edges, it's just going to be an awkward shape. But we can still do the whole Ctrl J thing to create a new selection from our previous layer. Turn that off. So this is how the selection thing works. We also have a third option for making selections. So let me delete this. Turn these circles off, make a new layer. Let's do a cloud maybe. It's a really bright color for a cloud, but it's okay. Okay, now we have a cloud. And inside I'm going to draw, maybe minimize my brush size a little. I'm going to draw a heart inside my cloud. Let's also do a straight line like this. Or actually, let's make a smaller selection, a smaller shape. We make like a plus next to it. So we have some random shapes within a larger shape. Then below that, we have a quick selection tool. This is something you would use more often, especially if you're working with photography. You would use this tool to make selections of your subject, maybe the clouds, the cars, or anything else to adjust certain, like you want to make that selection to maybe add a adjustment layer to it, mask it out, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Now, unlike these guys, when we went here, we didn't have much of a choice up here. We have this auto select option that makes sure it's always turned on. Now, you can see automatically select a group or layer by clicking on a visible pixel. If I turn this off, and let's say I have like multiple layers, I'm going to turn these two on. Okay, I'll put this here. Now, because there's no auto select, if I click on this, it's not going to tell me which layer or group I'm selecting. And let's say if I had like 50 different layers, it's going to be hard for me to figure out on which layer did I draw this plus sign. But if this auto select option is turned on, and if I click on the circle, it will go on that layer. So always make sure this is turned on. It's really helpful. That way you won't have to get frustrated over not knowing which layer you created that shape on. And in the following, these two tools, we have the same option here. We have one, which is new selection, add to selection, subtract from selection, intersect with selection. What that means, let's get the lasso tool out. If I made this shape, right, I made a new selection. Now I want to add to my selection, which you could also do by going on the selection and hold shift. Notice that plus icon next to it. That means that I'm adding to my selection. So if I make a new shape here, it's going to merge and now we have a larger selection. Let's say if I don't want that part, I will hold Alt on my keyboard. Holding Alt, you can see it goes from here to this. Look up there. The minus appears as well. Notice the mouse. There it is. And I can just draw something again. And now we have cut out that selection. The last option is to intersect. So what that means is that if I cut here, I've removed both sides and I only have this selection right here. So this is how it works. Then you have a feathering option. And feathering is just to make the edges smoother if you need that. Then we have an anti-alias. Keep that on, don't touch that. We have a select and mask option. We'll get into that later, but it's to create a more precise selection.